Kate had once been a bright-eyed young woman with dreams of her own. She had grown up in a strict but loving household, excelling in school and dreaming of becoming a teacher. Her life had been stable, filled with family dinners, Sunday church services, and the promise of a bright future. She had friends who admired her kindness and intelligence, and her parents were proud of her, until she met Martin. Martin was charming, spontaneous, and everything Kate's life had never been. He was the kind of boy who could make anyone laugh, who brought excitement into her carefully planned world. Kate fell for him hard and fast, believing that love could conquer all. She imagined a future where they would get married, have a family, and prove to the world that their love was real. But reality had different plans. At 22, Kate found out she was pregnant. She had expected Martin to panic, but she hadn't expected him to leave. His wealthy parents, disapproving of her lower-middle-class background, gave him an ultimatum: stay with Kate and the baby and lose his inheritance, or walk away and keep his lavish lifestyle. He chose the latter. Heartbroken, Kate turned to her own parents, hoping for support. But they, too, turned their backs on her. "You've brought shame upon this family," her father had said before shutting the door in her face. Her mother had looked away, unwilling to defy him. Alone, homeless, and pregnant, Kate had no choice but to start over. With limited options, she moved to the outskirts of the city, where rent was cheap, but safety was a luxury. Their apartment was small and barely livable, with thin walls that let in the shouts of their unruly neighbors and the constant blaring of sirens from the streets below. Kate worked tirelessly, days spent as a waitress at a diner and nights cleaning offices. On weekends, she baked pastries to sell at the market. She would return home late at night, exhausted, only to rise again before the sun. Kira grew up knowing that life wasn't fair. Her childhood was not one filled with toys, laughter, or the carefree days other kids enjoyed. Instead, it was a world of dimly lit rooms, secondhand clothes, and the constant worry about whether they could afford next month's rent. But despite it all, she never complained. She understood, even as a child, that her mother, Kate, was doing everything she could to keep them afloat. Kira often did her homework under the dim light of a single bulb, waiting for her mother's return. She had learned to be responsible at a young age, cooking simple meals and making sure the apartment was as tidy as possible. She never resented her mother's absence, because she knew it wasn't a choice. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, she would hear Kate crying softly in her room. That was when Kira promised herself that one day she would do whatever it took to change their lives. Despite their struggles, Kira excelled in school. She found solace in books and dreamed of becoming someone who could provide for her mother. Scholarships were her only way out, and she worked hard to earn them. Then, at 15, life threw them another curveball. Martin reappeared. He arrived unannounced one evening, standing in the doorway of their apartment like a ghost from the past. He looked different. Polished, wealthy, a far cry from the reckless boy who had abandoned them. Kira saw the way her mother's hands trembled, the way pain flickered across her face before she masked it with indifference. "What do you want?" Kate asked coldly. "I want to talk," Martin said, his eyes darting to Kira. "I made mistakes." Kira crossed her arms, skeptical. "You think showing up now fixes anything?" Martin sighed. "I want to make amends. My parents are gone, and I've realized how much I lost. I want to help." Kate scoffed. "Help? After all these years?" But then Martin revealed something that made Kate falter. He was sick, terminally ill. He had less than a year left, and he wanted to do one good thing before he left the world. He had money now, and he wanted to give Kira a future, the one he had stolen from her. Kate was torn. Could she accept help from the man who abandoned them? Would it be a betrayal of all the years she fought alone? Kira, despite her anger, saw an opportunity. "I don't need a father," she told him. "But if you're serious, put it in writing." "Help my mother too," she added rashly. Martin agreed. He set up a trust fund for Kira's education and bought Kate a better apartment in a safer neighborhood. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was justice. As the months passed, Martin grew weaker. Kira, despite herself, found sympathy for him. she watched him struggle with regret, realizing too late what he had lost. On his deathbed, he whispered to Kate, "I wish I had been stronger back then." Kate, though still wounded, held his hand as he took his last breath, not out of love, but out of closure. But the biggest twist came after his passing. When the lawyers finalized his will, they discovered that Martin had inherited far more than anyone knew. His parents had hidden away millions, and now it was all Kira's. For the first time in her life, she and her mother could breathe. But Kira, shaped by hardship, didn't waste the fortune on luxuries. She used it to put herself through school and help struggling single mothers like Kate. She honored her mother's sacrifices and built a foundation to ensure no woman would have to endure what Kate had gone through alone. Kira never forgave Martin entirely, but she learned an important lesson. Life was unfair, but it also had a way of surprising you. And sometimes the greatest revenge was turning pain into something beautiful.